Welcome to Book Hoots, Cambridgeshire Libraries podcast. I'm Rosie, I'm a member of the Library Development team, and in this episode we're talking to author William Shaw. William writes the Alex Cupidi and the Breen and Tozer series and has visited our libraries quite recently, so we know him quite well. I caught up with William in February. We had a wide-ranging chat where we talked about living through lockdowns, his reading parties, the next Alex Cupidi book, fellow crime writers, and quite a lot more. I began by asking him how he was.
I'm surprisingly well, really, considering it's early in the week. I've got a long meeting of the Crime Writers Association board to come up afterwards, which is a joy. But apart from that, everything's lovely. Actually, for writers being stuck at home through this, it's not the worst punishment in the world. I know some writers are finding it very hard to get through because they've got kids at home and they've got to do their home education while trying to write. Luckily, my kids are grown up, so I can just get on with stuff.
Yes, I've been saying to colleagues who do home educate, if I'd had to do that, particularly with my eldest, I'd be serving a life sentence now.
I don't know how they do it. Honestly, I keep hearing these people are getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning to do their own bit of work before the day starts. It's absolutely exhausting. And apart from the fact, the penny finally drops, teachers are quite good, aren't they? They actually kind of know what they're doing. And trying to explain fractions is really hard.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Common denominators.
Yeah, so mine will be stuck in front of the iPad. I'll just put them there. Find a nice game.
Yes, but won't they all really appreciate school when they go back?
That's true. That's true. I was thinking, I'm quite old, so I remember, for me, the sort of thing we used to boast about having lived through was the power cuts in the 70s. When you think, weren't they different, exciting? You never had anything like that. You kind of think they did. They've had something really extraordinarily big in their lives. And so hopefully that'll, like I say, they're really making friends again and doing all that stuff will be amazing, hopefully.
Yeah, and I just think probably a whole new set of values about education and school, because I used to watch kids who really didn't care and almost rejected it. Oh, it wasn't important. They were going to be a star anyway. And I really think this might recalibrate education. I hope it does anyway.
I hope it does as well. And not only for that, but for parents as well, because, I live in a sort of quite middle-class enclave of Brighton where parents can be quite aggressive to schools because they want little Johnny educated in such and such a way. Well, they've had the chance to do that themselves for the last year, and they might not be quite so ready with the criticism of schools now as they were, a year ago.
Did you see the letter from a head teacher who was thanking all of his parents for their input? And he was sure after their input he would have a lot of vacancies coming up, and many of the parents would like to apply perhaps for teacher training. So yes, it's quite interesting. But yeah, it's been an interesting almost a year now, because the last time you and I had a conversation like this, we were saying we were 3 weeks into lockdown. Last April.
It felt such a long time, 3 weeks in, didn't it?
Didn't it? Now we're 11 months in to various lockdowns, and it has become normal. I don't know what it has for you, but this is my normal.
Yeah, it has. Hopefully we'll learn how much we can do from home. It's not a bad thing, is it? Obviously lots of jobs can't be done from home, but for those of us who can, I've always worked from home. So for me, it's been fairly simple. But I love the idea where you don't have to jump into a car or onto a train to do everything. I really like that.
Yeah, I've found my commute. I get the car out and drive around the corner to my mother's or up to my local branch library, which is nearly a mile. I could walk, and I'll have a word with myself after this because that sounds bad. But that's it. My car used to do 1,000 miles a month.
Yeah.
And it's possibly doing 4 now.
And we're listening to less audiobooks because we're not doing long commutes, but we're reading more real books. And that's pretty exciting, I think. We are reading a lot of books, and it's really clear that people have got a lot of time for reading, and they've kind of they've completed Netflix now, and they can get back to books.
Yes. Have you done the spreadsheet? Are you one of the sad people, please join me, that's done a lockdown spreadsheet of everything they read?
No, no, Rosie, I'm not that way inclined. Show me a spreadsheet and I run.
No, I just know I have read so much more, and I read a lot before, but I was just interested to see, and I've discovered lots of new authors. Leslie Thompson, Jim Kelly, lots of authors that I needed to start reading because I was doing Twitter chats or something, and I've become totally immersed. And I like a series. I like a big, long series. And I've got my spreadsheet, and I think I'm pushing 100 now.
Wow. I mean, I'm always embarrassed because I'm quite a slow reader, actually, which is odd because I always thought I was a really fast reader. And then I joined, the world of crime fiction. I'm a crime writer, and obviously listening to people who read the sort of books that I write, they're omnivorous. They just consume huge amounts of books. Where I'm, I'll probably about half the rate of yours, I'd have thought.
Yeah, the problem is remembering.
Yeah, that's true. But then that's a great pleasure because you can get halfway through another book thinking, this sounds a little bit familiar, but I've forgotten what happened.
Yeah,
I shouldn't say that because I don't want to discourage people from buying new books.
No, it's all very valid and very worthy, which sort of leads me on. I mean, we've touched on it already about reading, and I see posts on social media about your reading party.
Yeah.
Now, I've just confessed to you that I can't bear being read to, so probably I'm not going to be a candidate, but, tell me all the goodness.
It is not for everyone, but I kind of, back at that thing where we spoke to each other almost a year ago, I went into this thing where I was interviewing writers every day. At 4 o'clock every day, I did a little sort of online thing. Was it 2 o'clock? I can't remember when. At 4 o'clock, I think. And so I just talked to loads of people. But I think after a while, we've got a bit fed up with just being talked to in that kind of way, especially the sort of panel things. There's a lot of it going on. And from the book events I was doing, what I was missing was a kind of interactivity. I was thinking, what is the new way of talking about a book? And you mentioned Leslie Thompson. Leslie Thompson, and Ellie Griffiths have done a lot of events together. And quite often we read from each other's work. And you're sitting there listening to somebody read your book and you think, wow, that sounds quite interesting, actually. The way they said that isn't the way I imagined it. And it's really nice hearing it from somebody or other who is, involved in the same sort of game as you. And I kind of thought, what if that, could we do that as a thing? So I did an event with Olivia Kernan where we got people to read bits from each other's book and read each other's book as well. And I was thinking, this feels lovely. It feels very inclusive. So what I do is I get 20 people in a room for a reading party, a new book and the author. And I divide up 3,000 words between 20 people. They each get 2 sections of about 100 words to read. And everybody says, oh, I'm really nervous about doing it. And then the first person reads and nobody's nervous. And by the end of it, what you get sent is like 2 sections of about 80 to 100 words. So you don't really know what's going on in the book. You just got these tantalizing little chunks. But by the end of 30 minutes, your chunk has fitted into the story and you've understood what the whole thing is. And it's just really nice because by the end of that, once 35 minutes are up, I sort of say, any questions? And of course, people, the barriers are broken. You've already made a fool of yourself by reading in public in front of everybody and the author. So you're all mates. And so everybody just chats about the book and what they've read in quite an easy kind of way. And it's been great fun to do it. And so I'm working with a bookshop to do this. And you can, if you buy a ticket, you can buy a new book. They can sign a book plate online and send you the copy of the book with the book plate in it. Because signing queues are a bit of a hard thing to do in lockdown. So it kind of matches that. And also, it puts book sales into live events, into online events, and also puts some sort of sense of participation. And it's been a lot of fun. And we've done about 9 so far. We got one. I'm doing one tonight with Laura Shepherd Robinson, her new book, Daughters of Night, which sold out straight away. They're all selling out straight away now, which is really nice. The publishers always say, oh, what, you can only get 20 people in? Yeah, but they're classy 20 people,
Actually, that does sound quite interesting.
You should come. You should get over your fear of being read to. The thing about being read to for me is generally I'm so used to it as a parent reading to children to make them to go to sleep. I expect everybody to fall asleep.
Well, I have done library events where that has happened. I mean, it does sound like you've put an awful lot of work into it, William.
I have. Yeah. Actually, but it's nice. It's a lockdown project. It's a bit like making a bit of furniture when you're, like these things. I just kind of thought it was something that needed to be, and until you do it, you have to do it to make it happen, if you know what I mean. And now it's happening. I'm sort of slightly scared that I'm kind of committed to doing it for the next 5 years. But I found a very good woman who's a woman called Becca Day, who just sort of sent me an email saying, "Need any help?" And she's just brilliant, and she's got great taste in books. And she thinks the whole thing's exciting because, there's not exactly money in it, obviously, like everything to do with books. But we're selling a lot of books. Bert's books. I just put in an invoice for 11 hardbacks for Laura's new book. And, it's lovely to do that to a bookseller, at recommended price. I've just sold 11 books. So I've sold, I don't know, a couple hundred books over the last whatever. That's quite a nice feeling.
That's really good. You'll get a medal somewhere. I'm not sure what of. But what is really interesting is I think that your project fits in really, really well with an awful lot of the noise that's coming out at the moment about reading for mental health, to avoid social isolation and loneliness. Have you seen any of the reading agencies' material, the Reading Friends?
No, I haven't.
Read, talk and share.
Right. That sounds brilliant.
Yeah, what you are doing sounds very much as if you've tapped into the psyche, I do believe.
Yeah, work a genius.
Ahead of your time. Or just possibly on a parallel path, who knows?
Yeah, no, I mean, that sounds brilliant, actually. It sounds really good. And I do think there is, I think we now know that we are going to be that social life will be restarting, but it's going to have to take a different form in some sort of ways. And you're just working out what ways of doing it. And seeing as books seem to have such a centrality to our lives now, I mean, it's really been brilliant for the written word, I think, because we've really learnt to value it. So it can take lots of forms.
It can, and just as a sort of a cynical aside from that, we know books have become far more valuable because there are remainder book warehouses selling shelves of book by, I would have said yard, but by the meter. So you can have your books on display behind you if you were hitherto a person who didn't have any.
Yeah, obviously, if we weren't listening to this on a podcast, to be able to see the heather leather chiseled tomes behind me, obviously.
Yeah. Well, I've moved since we last spoke, and I'm now in my mother's sitting room that she's not inhabiting yet. So I've got a blank wall behind me.
You could draw books on it.
I can have anything I like on it, basically. I've been sitting in front of big pink bubbles for the last few months, but I just choose a background and away we go. But no, that sounds really good. And it does sound as if going forward, hopefully there'll be a lot more value on books, reading, bookshops, book selling, libraries, the whole industry.
Yeah, and libraries, I really hope, because they're going to take a hit, because they always do. They certainly did last time around. There was austerity. They got absolutely trashed, and it took a huge amount of ingenuity from people working them to keep them going and keep them where they need to be. But surely we need them more now than anywhere, anytime. At least I guess the response to COVID has shown that the social does exist and is very important.
Absolutely, I totally agree. Totally. Moving on, I can see you've got a new book coming out.
Yes.
I'm waiting patiently. So, what can you tell us about it? It is a Cupidity and South, is it?
Yeah, it is. It's another one in the series set in Dungeness, and it's called The Trawlerman. And I wanted to write another book that was very much in that sort of sense of place. And so I was thinking, what else does the shoreline do? Well, of course, fishing. And so I began sort of working in this plot. Now, years ago, I was a journalist, and I wrote a piece on Brighton. I wrote a piece on 24 hours in the life of Brighton Beach, by interviewing lots of people and putting this together as a sort of timeline. I think it was the Independent on Sunday. And one of the people I met was this woman who sold fish from one of the arches down the front. And she was an old Brighton fishing family. And she said, yeah, I lost my first husband at sea. Actually, I was already in love with somebody else, but I wasn't able to marry him because we never found my husband's body. And I said, what? No, we had to wait 7 years because his body was never found. And I just thought there's something there. And so I kind of took that story about a wedding, starts with a wedding, and the bride and bride, it turns out, haven't been able to marry because of the 7-year rule. And then suddenly it comes up. But at the party afterwards, was being held at Dungeness, a woman comes along and points at one of the brides and says, murderer. And so it's around that. So I spend a great deal of time trying to find out about fishing around there and that little coast. And I was taken out by this guy called Luke right towards the end of, it's like early May. So lockdown was not really finished yet, but I snuck off on a train to Folkestone and got on a trawler at night, and we went out trawling over in the channel to get all those bits right. And it was a wonderful experience, after being locked away in a house, to find myself in the middle of the channel, in the middle of nowhere on this boat. with this one single-handed fisherman who knew everything and who's been the youngest fisherman ever to pass. I was put on. There's a writer whose name has escaped me at the most vital time, and this is Quentin Bates, who's a translator from Icelandic, and he writes his own crime things. But he's also the person who certifies fishermen, because he used to go out on the Icelandic trawlers. That's how he ended up in Iceland. And they said this is the youngest guy who was ever certified, and now is there doing his fishing. So he put me in touch with him. I went out on the boat, and it was just a magical experience and really, really brilliant for getting all that sort of sense of danger, because it's such a dangerous workplace, into the story. Very long answer, that.
Very fulsome. Thank you. I'm just wondering, because obviously after your last book, you seem to have been linked in everyone's mind with badgers, and I'm just wondering, is anything going to come out of Trawlerman that's going to link you to something new?
There is a badger in the Trawlerman, yes, but I won't say more than that, but there is a badger link. But I don't think quite in the same sort of way. I really, I mean, it's just like every book I try and find out a different way of writing it. And the book you were talking about, Gravesend, was very much come from the fact that in dark mists of time, I read a book called Waterland by Graham Smith, which is a murder story. It was literary fiction, but it's a kind of murder story, but it also features the natural history of the eel in it. And I was knocked out by that book. I still think it's a fantastic book. And I love that sense of interspersing real bits of natural history with the story. And I wanted to do that. So it's basically plagiarism. So I found a lot about badgers while writing that book.
I think everybody did, actually. I think everybody, when you came to us and you were talking about, researching badgers, we thought, oh, how's this going to go then? But I think everybody really enjoyed it, because it was a completely new perspective, wasn't it? Well, as far as I'm concerned, anyway.
I can't think of another crime fiction book written partly from the point of view of a badger. No. I'd like to...
Well done for that.
I'm not sure that's a point that makes people reach for it on the shelves, but
So have you got more in you in this series, do you think?
Oh yes.
Good.
Yeah, in fact, I'm just starting the follow-up now, and that's there's a my inspector has a troublesome teenage daughter, and in this book she decides to become a carpenter. And so there's going to be a lot about wood and carpentry and wood conservation and that kind of stuff in the book.
How lovely. I will really enjoy that, because, I've read about people during lockdown who get the urge to make things and make them out of wood. And I have got an awesome pile of pallets in the back garden from the building project, and I've got garden storage lined up, raised beds. So perhaps I should wait until your book's been published.
Well, of course, Zoe does it in the worst possible way, because she's a complete hair shirt idealist, sort of 17-year-old Extinction Rebellion kind of girl, and she wants to do it all without power tools. So she's making her life deliberately hard for herself.
Yeah, that's about right then. Yes, that sounds like my setup. So yes. We will see. I did get a new drill for Christmas, but that's about as far as it goes. So we'll see how we go on that one. But no, can't wait. And I mean, obviously, if you want anyone to read through in advance to check the spellings, that more than happy to do.
I need expert carpenters, obviously, to do that. So I'll be looking to you, of course.
Oh, thank you. I'll try very hard, very, very hard. I'll tell you what else I noticed last night when I was just having a little sift through your website. You get quite a lot of recommendations from fellow crime writers. And I have noticed during lockdown how supportive that corner of the industry tends to be. I mean, if you've got Val McDermott saying, if you're not a favourite yet, why not? If you haven't read it yet, why not? I mean, that's got to be ever so helpful, hasn't it?
Knocked my socks off, that did. I mean, that was out of the blue. That was just gorgeous. And you know what? One that came out completely out of the blue recently was like Sarah Paretsky, which, if you're a person of my age, she kind of created the whole mixture of politics and feminism and crime, which is hugely influential to everybody over here. But I mean, I think she sells less now in the UK than she used to. But when she sort of she just said something about one of my books on Twitter, and I was like, what? I mean, that's just amazing, because in the 80s, 90s, I was absolutely ripping through her books. Yeah, it's lovely, but also crime writers are very supportive of each other, and I think it's partly because crime writers are lovely, because they kill all the people in their book, and in real life they're they're much nicer. I think they get it all out that way. I don't know what it is. I think the other thing is we're writing in a successful genre, and it's fairly obvious that if somebody buys a Val McDermid book, that doesn't stop them from buying a William Shaw book. Do you know what I mean? Nobody's competing with each other. In fact, if you buy a crime book that you like, you're more likely to buy another one, and it doesn't have to be the same sort of person. And they're actually supporting each other just makes perfect sense. And I think, it's been amazing, that whole thing, as crime has become more and more successful, as it has done over the last decade, that actually the network of sort of self-support and respect has just grown and grown. And I think the same's happening now in romantic fiction a lot, because for a while everybody used to say, oh, the romantic fiction books, they're all, but actually from what I hear, they're also being, really self-supportive, because I think you have to be, partly because you work in little silos and publishers don't tell you everything. It's not they're bad people, but they're concentrating on publishing hundreds of books. They don't tell you that the best way to find out is to talk to your peers, and they're a very generous group about stuff like that, and very supportive. And they say nice things. But it's every time somebody says something like that, it makes me gibber with joy.
What I've started to do is, and I've started to read the recommendations and thinking, oh, well, if they think that this author that I like is good, would I like them? So I've picked up an Abhay Mukherjee.
Right.
But it's number 4, and I can't start at number 4 in a series. I can't. So I've read the first couple of pages, thought, oh, I like the way this person writes. So now I've gone and placed a reservation for book 1, which may come to me in a week. It may come in a month. It may come in 3 months, because everything's sort of slowed down, because obviously, the library world has slowed down a lot on reservations and things like that, because we're allowing people to keep books for longer.
A Death in the East, isn't it? The first one. That's, I think.
No, I think.
Is it? Or is it Smoke and Ashes?
I'm not going to argue with you, because I'm not entirely sure.
No, I'm not sure. But I can just remember finding them and just thinking, oh,
something like A Singular Man or something.
Singular Man. You're absolutely right. Yeah. That's it. Apologies, Abhay. You see, I've lost it, but he's brilliant, and he's got a very good sort of take, and it's that sort of rediscovery of that complexity of Britishness and Indianness, which is fantastic.
Yes, I read a galley proof of Vaseem Khan. Last year, thoroughly enjoyed that. Really, really made me start thinking about my family's roots way back in the Punjab, because they were military.
I think it's just so fascinating how much of our history, I mean, we're discovering this, right? It's another thing from this last year, is how much of our history is unexplored.
Yes.
And can be re-looked at, because it's about time we did. And I think all that sort of thing is like to recognise what Britishness means, and how, it's that wonderful quote, isn't it? We are here because you were there.
Yes.
And that our links are absolutely tied up with each other's, and there's lots of stories to be told about that.
Yeah, I mean,
really great at the moment.
Absolutely. I mean, it really prompts you to have a look. I mean, if my great-grandmother, who was born in an army orphanage in the Punjab, hadn't met my great-grandfather, who was in the army, who joined the army because he didn't like the job in a jam factory his father had put him into, they met on a tennis court in Sri Lanka when it was Ceylon, and came back to Townside. Now, what's the chance of that?
Yeah, but I think, you look into family stories, given how, Britain was so in the world.
Yeah.
In those times, massive amounts of working class people, middle class people went all around the world to make stuff, supervise stuff and things like that, during that period. But it's kind of stopped being written about in a curious kind of way, because it's difficult and it's complex, and it doesn't necessarily tell a simple or convenient story, and some of it's quite dark and mucky, but hooray, that's what we do, isn't it?
Well, that's what we should be doing, definitely. Now, I'm just going to tell you, my computer's very helpfully told me it's going to shut down in 6 minutes to do a restart.
Okay.
But, we have actually, we're doing quite well. So if we're going to be cut off, my last sort of area to look at is, we're now 11 months into this lockdown, or these lockdowns. I think we've all got more modest expectations of what we are really going to enjoy when we come out. And I'm just wondering whether with authors that's going to filter in, or can you still imagine a life that would have been normal? Or do you think our normal is forever going to be coloured by this year?
Yeah,
That's a really
I think a bit of the
worthy
latter.
question.
That's a massive one. I think it is a bit. I don't think we're coming out of this absolutely. I think we're coming out of it a lot. But I think, we've learned some stuff that we shouldn't throw it all away. And not everything about this last year has been negative. Lots of it has obviously been really negative, but there are other things about the way in which we connect with each other and care for each other are really positive, and hopefully some of that goes. But also, it's a disease, and that we're going to have more of this stuff. People have been telling us for years this is what the future is going to look like. We're going to have these shocks, and it's how well we cope with them that mean it is our civilization and things like that. So I think that's a bit of a big answer, isn't it? But yeah,
it is. It's a very big question, but it's just a question of can you see yourself deliberately writing in the new sense of sort of togetherness but separateness, or whether you just leave it? Or
I have written it in,
actually. Have you?
Yeah, both. I mean, I've written another book which is a standalone over that lockdown thing, and yeah, I have done, not in a big way, but one of the characters is a musician, and musician's life I've been fundamentally affected by that. So I just wrote that in because I think that's important, isn't it? If you're a musician, you've lost the ability to perform, and that's yourself. Writers, I can write. He can't do anything, and I think it's really interesting to see that. And I think that'll be, it's going to be problematic. Large crowds are going to be problematic for some time. So his whole profession, what it's based on, has changed. So he's got to rethink his whole life and his values. So I think, yeah, these things will have knock-ons, won't they?
I think so. Will that be coming out, or are you just stuffed that one up your jumper?
It's my agent is dealing with it now.
Ooh.
So I'm quite nervous every time my email pings.
Well, it'll be one or the other, won't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Right, well, I've got my little red liners going right to the end. I've got 3 minutes, 24 seconds remaining before your computer restarts automatically. If only life was that simple. So I think we'll round it off there. I mean, there's so many more things I could have asked you about. And, who knows, if this is not too scarring, we could maybe go for round 2 at some point in the future.
Always a pleasure. But this is what we should be talking like this, because I always feel like, you've got this obligation to sell your book. Well, actually, don't sell your book by talking. You talk stuff.
Yes,
and it's good.
It is lovely to talk stuff, and it's lovely to talk stuff with people that you wouldn't normally be able to talk stuff with. Because previously you would have been ushered into a library, probably by one of your publishing people, and we would have bowed down and made you tea and coffee and been terribly polite to you, and you would have done your bit and you would have gone.
I'm missing the bowing down. I'm also missing the tea, coffee and biscuits.
Yeah, I'm missing the free copies of books, but that's quite...
but all this...
The uncorrected proofs.
All that can come back.
It will be lovely, but, as you say, it'll be a little way down the line, won't it? Yeah. But, we are just... we can't wait, but we've got to wait, because I haven't seen a library audience now for a year.
No, the last events I did was pretty much exactly this time of year, and we were up further up your old way. We're up Newcastle,
oh, yeah.
And just when the first case arrived in Newcastle, we were just catching the train out, thinking help, and I arrived in Brighton just when the first case. Back at home in Brighton just when the first case was discovered here. So it felt like it was chasing us at the time.
Yeah, well, I think it probably was already there. We were just seeing it, weren't we?
Yeah.
But there you go.
But I do want to have mad conversations in pubs with drunken people who I don't know. I miss randomness.
Yes. I just talk to myself a lot, and I don't think it's entirely good for me. Anyway, thank you so much, William.
Keep up the very good work you do up there. It's brilliant.
Well, and you, please do, because, I really need to read what you've got in your head, and you can't pull it out of your head quick enough for me. Okay, thank you so much, William.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to our first podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. We'll let you know as soon as we have more episodes ready to launch. In the meantime, do visit our website and social media pages to find out what's happening. Book Hoots is produced by Cambridgeshire Libraries.